Okay, let's hide everybody.
Okay, so yesterday we spoke about the varying types of anxiety and how they can affect people differently, including the ways it can affect different parts of the body. We then went on to talk about one of our favourite things, the conscious and the unconscious mind, and that to create change we need to get past the critical faculty, because all change work needs to take place at the unconscious mind. We also spoke about the prime directives of the unconscious mind. So we covered the top 5, and we think an important one to remember when it comes to things like anxiety is it keeps memories repressed for protection and then presents for resolution. So these repressed memories can sometimes cause us to have symptoms such as anxiety. And until the negative emotions attached to those repressed memories are removed, then the symptoms will remain. And basically that's what we do when we're training and coaching people. We get to the root cause and remove the negative emotions, and that allows us to then remove the symptoms. So for example, anxiety. So we finished by talking about the mind-body connection, which isn't, well, we think is an absolutely fascinating subject, and is something we both have a lot of interest in, as we've seen it in play with lots of our clients. And Claire posted the video in the group, which I'd highly recommend watching if it's something that interests you. And as we said, to understand anxiety, it's essential that we understand the basics of how the mind works, which is the basis of our masterclass. So tonight we're going to go into a bit more detail. So slide 1, please, Mrs.
There we go.
Thank you. So we're going to start talking about the way the difference between the conscious and the unconscious mind when it comes to our thoughts. So believe it or not, only 5% of our cognitive activity, such as making decisions, our emotions, our actions, and our behaviour, is conscious, whereas the remaining 95% is generated in the unconscious mind. So if you have a look at the slide, think of the conscious and the unconscious mind as like an iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg is the 5% and the bottom of the iceberg is the 95%. So the conscious mind is the domain of your logical reason, which is like what we think is acceptable, like on a daily basis. The unconscious mind is the domain of all your values, emotions, habits, and healing and learning. I'm going to touch a little bit on values here, as they are actually huge when it comes to how we act and react in life. So values are things that are important to us. They're how we decide whether our actions are good or bad and right or wrong. They are like high-level generalizations that describe what is important to you. They're like a filter, and they are how we decide how we feel about our actions. And they basically guide our every decision, and therefore how we act and react in life. Values are, they basically drive our behaviours. So they provide the primary motivating force behind our actions, and therefore have a massive impact on our outcomes. They motivate us to do what we do, and all this happens unconsciously, and can in some cases actually have a negative impact on us, and can be the cause of negative emotions, as a lot of our values are passed to us from other sources as we go through life, and different events happen. The good thing is that if they are having a negative impact on us unconsciously and causing the unconscious mind to create something like, for example, anxiety, then it is possible to change a person's values. And again, that's something we do when we're training and dealing with clients. When it comes to emotions, which are unconscious, we can hide them, but we can't control them. But we can control how we feel and look in a certain situation. So that explains why some people are good at hiding their emotions. The emotions can be seen and relayed through actions, yet these actions can be controlled. So all actions can be controlled. So we can change how we act, feel, or deal with our emotions. But the emotions will always be there unconsciously. And if they are negative, like when someone has anxiety, then they will remain negative until the change work takes place at the unconscious mind. Learning, if I'm just going to hit on learning, so learning is quite straightforward. So we will all have been learning since we were born, and most of what we've learned over the years is stored in the unconscious mind. So for example, you don't have to think about how to walk every time you need to go anywhere. It just happens because the unconscious mind is in control and takes over for you. So that's just a bit about the sort of iceberg with the conscious and the unconscious. So over to you, Claire.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So just on the value side, I just want to add a little bit extra in, if that's okay, because I think it's quite useful. So with the values, our beliefs are also really closely tied to our values as well, and they are also unconscious. So our values and beliefs, although we consciously know them, they're very closely tied together as well. That's really important to know. So the next slide is cause and effect. And until we did our training, until we did our first introduction to NLP, I didn't have any idea this was even a thing. So cause and effect is basically results versus reason. So if you're at cause on an event or a period in your life, you're getting results. And if you're at effect of the situation, then you're making reasons and excuses why things aren't working for you. Examples of perhaps why you maybe have anxiety. Being at cause gives you the power. So we have to take some responsibility, and Claire and I have done this, and we still do this now. Whenever we're in a situation, I mean, don't get us wrong, we still have effect in our life, but we don't spend so much time there where we're kind of blaming everything else for stuff that's happening. So what we kind of want to draw to your attention is, so we're not saying that you have to take the blame. So in fact, what we're just saying is for you to look at what decisions you've made to get you there, and this gives you the power back. So this empowers you in any situation. So if you think about times in your past, so I'll give you some examples of mine. I had a car accident, so I wasn't at fault in the accident. Someone drove into the back of me, but it caused me quite a lot of back problems. And I was quite angry about that for quite a long time, actually. So what I did was applied this cause and effect to that situation. So I looked at what I had decided to do to put me in that position. So I decided to drive. Grant was going at the same time as me to the same place, but we were going from different directions, so it was just easier. So I decided I'd just meet him there. And I decided which route I would take on the way back. And then at the roundabout where I didn't make the decision to go when there was time, then that gives me, you know, if I decided to go, she wouldn't have hit me, but she did because I decided not to. So at some point I made a decision that put me in that place at that time. I hope that makes sense. Also staying in a relationship for longer than I probably should have. I've done that many a time. But I've made the decision to stay in that relationship. So, you know, I'm not taking the blame for everything that happened in the relationship, but I'm kind of taking back my power by saying, yeah, that happened, but I decided to be in that relationship at that time. So it just gives you the power back. And I think it's quite powerful as well, knowing that you can kind of go, well, what did I decide to do in that situation? So that's cause and effect. Over to Claire.
Cool. I was just going to add about cause and effect, if that's okay.
Yeah.
with myself, due to some of the sort of traumatic events that had happened in my life, what I found when I did learn NLP and everything, cause and effect was huge, absolutely huge, in helping me to forgive. Forgiveness and cause and effect really sort of gel together. They really help each other. And once I learned to forgive, I realized that I was then at cause for everything, and everything just sort of dissolved. Once I became at cause for everything, everything became like sort of dissolved, and I managed to forgive a lot of people for things that had happened in my past. So it is really, like Claire said, it's so powerful to be able to be at cause for things. So on to the NLP model of communication. Oh gosh, this is another one of our favorite things, and explains a lot about how the mind works, and it's so well for like knowing. I mean, what we go through tonight, what I'm going to sort of talk about, it will be like a jumble at first, but if you sort of listen to this over and over, and then maybe look it up as well, it's quite powerful. So basically, NLP began as a model of how we communicate to ourselves and others, which was developed by two people called Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And this model explains basically how we process the information that comes into us from the outside. So the belief is that the map is not the territory. And so the internal representations that we make about an outside event are not necessarily the event itself. So typically what happens is that there's an external event that happens, and we run that event through our internal processing. So we make an internal representation of that event. That internal representation of the event combines with a physiology and creates a state. So it creates a state like within us. And state basically refers to the emotional state of us. So a happy state, a sad state, a motivated state, and so on and so on. So our internal representation includes our internal pictures, sounds, and dialogue, and our feelings. For example, whether we feel motivated, challenged, pleased, excited, and like so on. A given state is the result of the combination of an internal representation and the physiology. So the two go together. So what happens is that an event comes in through our sensory input channels, and they basically come in through visual, so including sights we see or the way someone looks at us, auditory, which is including sounds, the words we hear and the way that people say those words to us, kinesthetic or external feelings, which includes the touch of someone or something, and the pressure, like, and the texture. There's olfactory, which is the smell, and gustatory, which is taste. So the external event comes in through our sensory input channels, and it's filtered. So that is us processing the event. And as we process the event, we do three things. We delete, we distort, and we generalize the information that comes in. So let me just sort of give a brief explanation of them. So deletion occurs when we basically selectively pay attention to certain aspects of our experience and not others. We then overlook or just ignore others. So without deletion, we would be faced with far too much information to handle with our conscious mind. So deletion basically allows our conscious mind to keep going, because it deletes loads of information and just keeps us sort of steady with the amount of information we can have. Distortion occurs when we make like shifts in our experience of sensory data by making like basically misrepresentations of reality. You might have heard this. So like in Eastern philosophy, there's a well-known story of a distortion in the rope versus the snake. So a man walking along the road sees what he believes to be a snake, and he like shouts out loud, "Snake!" But once he arrived at the place, he was relieved as he discovered that what he saw was only a piece of rope. And that's sort of like that's distortion, sort of explained in like a metaphoric state. Generalization, this is the third process. So when we draw global conclusions based on one or two experiences, at its best, generalization is one of the ways that we learn, by taking the information we have and drawing broad conclusions about the meaning of the effect of those conclusions. So normally the conscious mind can only handle 7 items of information at any one time. So the information from the outside that comes in from the senses that I've just explained, they come in on one of 5 filters. So the filters of the NLP communication model are meta programs, belief systems, values, decisions, and memories. And I'm only going to touch briefly on these. But so meta programs, it's basically knowing someone's meta programs can help you clearly and closely predict people's states, and therefore predict their actions and their behaviors. Values, so as I said earlier, values are essentially an evaluation filter. So they are how we decide whether our actions are good or bad, right or wrong, and how we feel about our actions. Beliefs, so beliefs are generalizations about how the world is. Beliefs are the assumptions that we have about the way the world is, that either create or deny personal power to us. So beliefs are really essentially our on-off switch. Then there's memory. So the 4th filter is memory. So in fact, a number of psychologists say that the present plays a very small part in our behaviour. They believe that as we get older, our reactions are in the present, our reactions in the present are more and more basically just reactions to past memories. And we build like a gestalt, which is a collection of memories. And that one is actually quite key when it comes to things like anxiety, because that will have been implanted on the gestalt in our memories, and anxiety is basically a symptom of something that has been implanted in our memories. And then there's decisions. So so it's decisions that we've made in the past. So decisions may create new beliefs, or may just affect our perception through time. The problem with many decisions is that they were made unconsciously, or at a very early age, and are forgotten, but the effect is still there. And again, that could, memories and decisions, I mean, they all play a part, but memories and decisions sort of can have like once you know about them, and they could be key in making change at the unconscious level for things like anxiety. But to be honest, the NLP model of communication is such a huge subject, and it's something that we would go into more detail on our 21-day program. But it's huge, and it's so interesting as well. But yeah, that's a bit about the NLP model of communication. So back over to you.
Yeah, so that leads on to our next slide. I do love the NLP communication model. Is really kind of, it makes you think about how we see everything. And the next slide is perception is projection, which is about how we see the world. So if we flick back quickly to this one. So you've got the external events, hopefully my mouse will move. So you've got the external event coming in at 11 million bits per second. So that goes through our senses. So as Claire said, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, the olfactory and gustatory, they get deleted and distorted, and then it gets filed as an internal representation with a state and a physiology attached to it. And we only save out of that 1 million bits per second, 120 bits per second is available to us consciously. And that's why it's really important to understand that it doesn't matter. So we're all at the moment going through exactly the same. We're listening to the same. I just listened to Claire speak. You guys listen to Claire speak, but based on our what we call model of the world. Sorry, wrong way. So our model of the world. So based on our filters. So our meta programs, our values, our beliefs, our attitudes, our decisions in the past, and our past memories. So we will have different ones of those, and beliefs about time, space, matter and energy, and a type of language we use. And that means that we'll all save. Sorry, let me just take off audio for everybody. Yeah, so based on that information, we all have a different, probably quite a different 126 bits of information that we have, that we can consciously access. So we would always see things differently and take different things from the same situation. So it'll be all about how we perceive things to be, actually, how accurate is that information, because we've not got all of the information to make it, if that makes sense to everybody. Again, we'll do questions at the end, so if there's any questions we can do those at the end. Over to you, Claire.
So shadow me. Okay, so I'm not going to go into huge detail on this, but it's an empowering way to get us thinking about things. And with what we do, like the more empowering stuff, the more empowering ways you can get of thinking about things, the more your mind evolves, and the more possible it is to get rid of things like anxiety and get to the root cause of things. So the concept basically of a person's shadow is the idea that we project all of the aspects of ourselves that we do that we don't want to accept onto others around us. So the things we see in others that we hate, they're really parts of ourselves that we dislike and we've shut ourselves away from. So these projections are facets that we do not want to accept as part of who we are. So we apply them to other people as a way to distance ourselves from them. As you come to recognize these outer aspects as part of yourself, that they lose their effect on you, and that's why it's so empowering. So you stop noticing the things in other people that used to bother you so much, and because you've accepted those things and chosen to re-own those disowned parts of your personality. So the shadow self actually shows you the things that you need to work on in yourself. So let me give an example. So rather hating that terrible driver on the road, and this was me, believe me, this was me. I used to have such bad road rage. So rather than like hating that driver on the road, you realise, wow, I guess I'm a terrible driver. And it's true. So chances are you've done the exact same thing that you hate the person in front of you on the road for doing. So an example of this was, I had an accident, quite a bad accident a little while ago, and the guy I ended up being at fault, but the guy was coming around the roundabout and he didn't indicate, but because I pulled out, because I thought he was going straight ahead, he wasn't indicating and I got the blame. But I was so angry about the fact that he hadn't indicated, and then I sat back and thought, okay, well, there's been times I haven't indicated, and then I started thinking, actually, there's been quite a few times I haven't indicated, and that could have just been me as well. So, you know, it's basically I suddenly sort of understood that that's something within me that I've done. So this situation plays out in so many different areas of our lives, and you will be astounded when you start noticing it. And Claire and I find this fascinating. I've found it a really empowering way to think, as it stops us from pointing that finger, a bit like perception is projection, which Claire just went through. So if you think about it, it's like if you're pointing that finger at someone, you've got 3 fingers pointing back at you the whole time, and that's a good way of thinking about the shadow me. Perception is projection, and a lot of people won't understand it at first, but the more you try and think like this, the more empowering it is, and again, the more it opens the neural networks in your mind, and the more able you are to make change work much easier, if there's anything sort of negative going on. So yeah, that's a bit about shadow me. It's again, it's quite a huge subject. So
yeah, it is huge. So I'd love shadow me. The reason I do was because if we go back to my story yesterday, where I mentioned my suicidal thoughts, it used to drive me absolutely mad having those. So the way I would recommend dealing with it, if you do have thoughts that come up that you're like, God, that's not me, why am I thinking that, like the suicidal thoughts, or maybe wanting to, I don't know, maybe hurt somebody or lash out, not that you would, but it's just to make you just accept that you're capable of doing that, because in every situation people will possibly do certain things, and it only makes you a bad person if you do it. Thinking about it doesn't make you a bad person. So we're all capable of anything. So the way I dealt with some stuff was, I could do whatever it was, but I'm just choosing not to. And whenever it came up, I would say that to myself, and they go away quite quickly then, rather than keep kind of repeating themselves. But it is a really, you can go into this in so much detail, can't you?
You can,
It
yeah.
is,
I mean,
with all of this.
there's one example that our coach gave us was, someone didn't sort of believe this perception is projection and shadow me, and was like, no, I'd never do that, I'd never do that, I'd never do that. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Claire, but they said to her, well, if someone, I mean, this is a bit graphic, but he basically said, so if someone did something sort of sexually to your children, what would you do? And she immediately said, well, I'd kill them. And although she wouldn't kill them, that thought immediately came up. And so that's a good example of what you were just saying, Claire, is that it's acceptable to have them thoughts, and it's not wrong to have them thoughts, but it's whether you act on them that is different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, we could talk about all of this like for hours and hours and hours. We could go into so much more detail. So we're going to cover more of this in our 21-day program. But so for now, we did say that we were going to show you a process to quieten the conscious mind down. So we're going to do that now. So this is peripheral vision. So we spend a lot of our time in foveal vision, which is where we're focused in on something. So our phones or our work tablets or our computers, or even reading a book, we do in foveal vision. And it's okay in times, but that does allow the conscious mind to be really, really active. So we're going to teach you how to use peripheral vision. and you can still do everything else as normal whilst in peripheral vision, but it just quietens down the conscious mind. So peripheral vision is a wider extended vision, so you can see a wider range, and that quietens the conscious mind. So we're going to talk you through how to do this now. So what I'd like everybody to do is to, where you're sitting now, just sit back and relax, put both feet flat on the floor, and I want you to focus on a spot just above your eye line, just so above eye, sort of just above eye level, but a spot on the wall or at a point in front of you. And then I want you to just relax your eyes, so relax the muscles around your eyes and just allow your vision to extend out. And as your vision extends out, you'll find you'll have a larger and larger vision field. And as that vision extends, what I want you to do is just to lift your hands. Actually, I should probably put my camera on so you guys can see me. Hang on a second. Right, so once you've got your vision point, I want you to raise your hands to the side so you can see your fingers, and just give your fingers a wiggle. And when you can see your fingers, that means you're in peripheral vision. And once you're in that position and you can see your fingers wiggling, you can put your hands down and just return your vision eye level down to normal. And that's peripheral vision. And Claire and I use this all of the time now, because it just quietens down, especially with anxiety. That conscious mind and that self-talk is all conscious. So as we explained earlier, you spend 95% of your time doing everything unconsciously. It's only 5% of the time you're consciously aware of what's going on, and your anxiety is conscious. So if we switch into peripheral vision and use that more and more, then you will find the self-talk becomes less and less and less. So what we would like you to do, we're going to post a video into the group later today, because I did one on my business page, so I'll just share that in. So we'd like you to keep practicing going into peripheral vision, because it's really, really good for anxiety. And if you want to, it's called the learning state. So if you have any children that you have in your family, or young adults, or anybody, just teach them this or show them the video, because our goal is to get as many people to know the benefits of peripheral vision as possible. So if you have children who are at school, then if they use peripheral vision, a lot more information will just go in. And that's peripheral vision. So how's everyone getting on with that? Has everybody managed to do that?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, so if I can get everybody's videos back.
Sorry, I've just got to let the cat out. It's crying to go out. Hang on a minute.
Right. Let's. Come on.